of
Could just do part 1, part 2, part 3.
well, I think it's live, but it always gets a bit out of hand when it's not doing what we planned. Okay, I think we're back.
Good.
Let's see if I can check if we're actually live here. Here's YouTube. Just gets so screwed up when it doesn't go the way it's planned to go. Let's keep walking and we'll figure it out along the way. So sorry, before that woman told us what to do, you were saying something.
I think, was I talking about, we were talking about how the Republicans in 17 should have shut the Mueller thing down to begin with.
Yeah.
Before it got to the level of firing Comey. And they didn't do that. And then they sat passively by because I guess everybody was fearful that an obstruction of justice trap was being laid by the coup plotters. But the Republicans certainly did not fight adeptly in 2017 and 18. And here we are shutting the world down at trillions, multi-trillions of cost for the U.S. and probably in the tens of trillions of cost globally for yet a different bunch of unelected, extra-constitutional folks have somehow changed the whole system of governance worldwide. We no longer have an elected government officials to serve the people. We, the people, have to stay at home and wait to learn whether some ass clown governor like Cuomo will wake up on the right side of the bed and decide that we are entitled to enjoy the fruits of our labor and
just
taking risks, for gain, using our minds as opposed to following these bureaucrats who were precisely wrong. They were not even partially right. They were spectacularly wrong in their decision to shut the economy down. And every day we keep it shut. It's nuts.
It's worse than nuts. It's there's the economic impact, and then, we see, even just from that woman who feels that she has the right to intrude upon our space. Yesterday, people who were watching saw a guy who seemed disturbed to me, told me he was an NYPD officer, also instructed me to put on a mask. I mean, this is creating an invitation. It's almost a nonstop invitation for confrontation on the street. Now, it's interesting, Charles, I'm sure you haven't had a chance to see that video from yesterday, but in addition to just harassing me, this guy on the street who initially appeared to be some just random individual standing there, he followed me, and then about a half a block away we encountered two other people who he knew, and he told them that I said that I was NYPD, seemed to instruct them to do something. Are these contact tracers who are just walking around policing everybody? Speaking of police.
Contact tracing is a preposterous idea from what I read about now, given where we are in this. Contact tracing is not, you're tracing the path of the virus, not the path of the person. And we don't know when this virus first hit. There are reports coming out of Europe now that it hit France in December. I suspect it's before that. And we simply don't know. So the control freaks, the unelected globalist control freaks, like Bill Clinton and Bill Gates, they want to put us through an exercise where everybody has to get a vaccine and everybody has to be traced and everybody has to follow a fearless leader.
Right.
But that's not what we signed up for in this country.
No, and definitely mandatory vaccines. I mean, this is absolutely crazy. These are untested vaccines. I mean, even if you are for untested vaccines, I don't see how you could be. They try to make these issues, Charles, very binary. They don't want to get into the details. It's the same thing that Barack Obama is doing with General Flynn. He doesn't want to get into the details of how the FBI questioned him, how this confession was arrived at. They keep coming back to, oh, this is a guy who confessed to perjury.
Well, there's an excellent conservative Treehouse article Sundance that came out either yesterday or this morning. It explains that the surveillance on Flynn started way before 2016.
Right.
And actually, indeed, the surveillance, I know Andrew Napolitano told me at one point that beginning in sometime in 2002 or thereabouts, every keystroke on every computer is stored away somewhere in supercomputers or wherever, so that if the NSA wants to get in, it has a right.
Got the audio problem now, Charles. Hang on a second. It's becoming very frustrating to do this, and either that's just a function of it being a frustrating thing, or perhaps someone deliberately trying to frustrate. I don't have any indication of anything other than random errors, but let's see if we can get it back here. Okay, let's carry on.
Yeah, so where was I? Oh yeah, so the surveillance happened well beforehand, and indeed under Obama, and perhaps likely under W. Bush as well, under a theory that we couldn't be too careful fighting perceived terrorists, a lot of information was vacuumed up, likely illegally. And the twist being that under Obama, the exercise became an exercise to target your political opponents and rivals. And I believe that did happen. And I think we have to have a full exposition of the degree to which that did happen. The parties who engaged in that, and then the parties who plotted to keep it secret what had happened, all of those people need to be exposed. If they're lawyers, they need to be disbarred.
Disbarred, yeah.
They then need to be prosecuted. And the full extent of the invasions of privacy and criminality need to be made known.
See Dick Tracy over there?
Yeah. And so that we can, so people will understand that when we get another Obama, another Hillary Clinton, who decides that you can train the resources of our government to serve a narrow partisan political purpose, or worse, to enrich your families and your cronies. When people decide to do that, they'll know that you don't do that, because the last time people in high positions of power did that, they lost all their money and went to jail for the rest of their lives, which is, I think, the appropriate punishment here, not death.
Well, I would prefer death for some of these people.
Well, death is too nice. I mean, you should make them go from private plane only, presidential suite only, gourmet meals only, to living the rest of their lives in prison,
Yeah,
worried about whether they'll be killed each night, eating junk food, getting COVID-19, no release, no nothing. You're in prison for the last moments of your life. And by the way, in the case of you really wanted to be mean, you'd force the people who've collected money from these books to listen to their books, you know, read by Minnie Mouse or some character in a strange accent for the rest of their lives. You imagine having to listen to somebody, maybe even at 78 RPM, or alternating between 78 RPM and 33. And what's the next one down? 18?
45.
44. What's the one underneath 33? You know, just go from speed to speed, accent to accent, having to listen to somebody read Bill Clinton's My Lies, My Life, or Hillary Clinton's lying history, living history.
Now, wait a minute. Speaking seriously for a moment, what do you think the likelihood is? It's quite clear that Barack Obama is backpedaling. We were speaking earlier about how in this phone call that's been released, amazingly reported on by Michael, what's his name, Isikoff, same guy who broke the dossier story.
And the Lewinsky story.
I thought it was Matt Drudge who broke the Lewinsky story.
But it was based on reporting. Newsweek had spiked an Isikoff attempt to break it out, and it was that leaked out that Drudge reported on.
So is he one of these guys who maybe started out as a legitimate reporter, and then when he hits on something big like that, they say, hey, we gotta stop this guy from releasing stuff that we don't like, so let's get him under our control, and now he's a Democrat operative like David Brock?
I don't know. I think what he is, he's a source-based reporter. He encourages sources to come to him. And he works with those sources and tries to break stories from the inside. But this is a planted story. If Barack Obama were a quarter as intelligent as people believe he is, he would have hired a legitimate law firm to write a brief, an analysis that he would have issued contemporaneously with his statement that there's never been a precedent for this type of activity. He might have remembered that Eric Holder did just this in the Ted Stevens case. So
it's also irrelevant if there is or isn't a precedent. It's a matter of, was the law abused to frame Flynn or not? And Obama wants to move people off of that point. Don't look at the illegality that was used to frame the guy. Let's just talk about he already pled guilty, so end of story.
Well, I think, you know, if you want to talk about the wider picture, I think the Obama presidency was basically a shakedown presidency. They figured out that they had massive power with the IRS and the Department of Justice to go after rich people or anybody who wanted to do business with the government. And so, you know, that's why no high-level financial executives, go that way, I guess?
Well, where are we wanting to go? Do we want to visit that statue again and see if anything, wasn't there something we wanted to see in Central Park other than the hospital? We saw the tennis court.
Not really. It's just a question of, we could maybe go on a different tangent than last time. I don't know.
Sure.
But
I think people probably just want to see what the activity in Central Park is looking like this week versus last week. There are some people who are out without masks.
It's quite busy.
Yeah.
So we'd have to go behind the, we face the choice, do we go behind the Metropolitan Museum of Art, meaning we have to go that way, or in front of it?
Well, we went in front of it last time, so let's go behind it.
Okay.
So you don't think, or have you told us if you do or don't think, will Barack Obama face charges? It seems like Sidney Powell and everybody who is looking at facts and evidence feel that
yes,
this went straight up to the top and that Barack Obama is implicated.
Well, people know I'm not a lawyer and I'm certainly not a criminal prosecutor, but when you follow how this is normally done, you don't dare you don't dare to go against the top person unless you flip people underneath them. So as a guess, they have flipped people underneath the president, and we're now in a final negotiation stage where it's going to be a lot like Nixon.
Huh.
You know, not that he could technically be impeached, but rather than put the country through the agony of a trial, you're going to lose. You know, if you plead guilty, we'll give you this sentence. You know, and if you make us put the country through this, we're going to throw the book at you.
I would love it if they put Barack Obama on trial. That would be the best.
Well, certainly, whether it was he who was doing it, or Valerie Jarrett, or George Soros, or who knows who was behind that presidency, the precedents that have been set with the Fast and Furious case, with what was going on in Benghazi, with the use of
I meant to actually make a little video of this to show everybody, but let's take a look at this real quick. But the president of Mexico apparently came out with some kind of statement wanting answers about Benghazi.
Oh, really? When did that happen?
Not Benghazi, Fast and Furious. I just saw it. Well, we can't really see what I wanted to see.
We'll see in a second when we go.
He's saying that it created tension on both sides and that there was complicity with drug cartels.
Yeah,
Sounded like a pretty explosive statement, and it seemed like people are sort of like piling on to what they recognized as a failed presidency with Obama.
Well, so a portion of this scandal that I think is starting to come out, we're seeing more and more mentions of it, is the idea that in order to pay a bribe to either first the Clintons and then the Obamas, the way you do that is you make a contribution to these foundations. You say you make a contribution. And then depending on the deal you cut, some percentage of that money goes to the foundation and some percentage gets skived off.
Should we go over and take a look at
Sure.
the glass? This is something that people will like.
This is really a beautiful museum. I've always loved going to this place. Of course,
Yeah.
you can't go now.
So they skive off some of this money that they're giving to the foundations.
Right.
There's a lot of foundations, and you know, Amazing Polly did a very interesting video that a lot of people are sending to me, where she's connecting the various foundations linked to the WHO, to the, Partners in Health was
And
mentioned.
the CDC.
The CDC, yes, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and just talking about how money goes,
So we're going to go back.
from one. Well, I want to look into the glass over here. That's
all the way
kind of a
down.
nice part of the museum if we can get near it. But just how money is going from one foundation to the next, and they all have these 501c3s, and it seemed like a way to just churn money through these tax-exempt things. And it causes me to think about some other people who we know who are involved with 501c3s that seem to get a lot of money put into them in 2018, who are represented by lawyers who are representing Devin Nunes. It's just interesting that all these guys are running 501c3s.
Right, so that whole area, as we talked about, private foundations, 501c3s, it all must be brought into the 21st century by way of reporting. It's very difficult to open a bank account now and send money internationally, but with a 501c3, particularly if you've gamed the IRS, which I believe is still the case, and there are more than enough crooked accountants, BKD, that you can hire. Did I say BKD?
I should have had the tiger ready to display.
I didn't just say BKD, did I?
You did.
Oh, anyway.
But it's almost like these 501c3s, Charles. It's a trick that some people are in on and we're not.
Well, yeah, there are many people who are in on it, and I think it's not just the Clinton Foundation. It's also shame on Harvard University, shame on Yale University. These brand names that confer instant. You say you're doing a project backed by Harvard, the next thing you know, Jeffrey Epstein, you get an office at Harvard. And you can bring these young interns who say, hey, well, I'm a visiting fellow at Harvard. Want to get on my private plane and I'll give you some counseling to relieve my anxieties on the way to Harvard. And
it also causes me to wonder to what extent is Epstein in there to compromise. I didn't realize how loud that ice cream man was. To what extent is Jeffrey Epstein getting in there into Harvard because all of your best scientists and all of your sort of burgeoning scientists are going there, and when you're 18 at Harvard, it seems like maybe you don't have the best judgment. You could be compromised at some kind of party. You could be a gullible student or whatever. There's a lot of reasons to believe that Epstein may have somehow entrapped Charles Lieber. There was this article that I accidentally just briefly showed a moment ago from Harvard Magazine. We were speaking earlier this week with Judy Mikovits about the concept of could nanotechnology be small enough to get inside your cell, and then Harvard Magazine tells us in 2011 they had transistors the size of viruses. This is incredibly interesting information to me, Charles, because I didn't know anything about nanotechnology before we started talking about that, and if there are transistors the size of viruses, that article tells us these nanotechnology devices could be used to trigger the immune system to do things. So how do we know that this nanotechnology hasn't been integrated into flu vaccines or even aerosol sprays that can be just, people talk about chemtrails, anybody brings that up and they say you're a conspiracy theorist. There was a speech that John Brennan gave at the Council on Foreign Relations where he said he thinks that aerosolized aluminum injection is fantastic.
Yeah,
what if
he's a real turd.
But what if they've been spraying nanotechnology and we breathe it in? I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but they're the ones who are telling us this technology can do this stuff. Yeah. It's windy, people will get upset.
Should we go back into the park?
We can do that.
Forgive us here, it's a beautiful view. This is prime real estate here. Very much busier than the last time we were here.
Right, last week, so it's nice to revisit this a week later. It seems like ice cream trucks are out in full force.
That's a sausage truck.
Is it?
Yeah.
Cones and shakes, it says.
New York hot dog.
That?
Water 7?
Oh no, I was looking to the left.
Never look to the left, Jason.
Sorry,
you always
Charles.
look to the right.
But Charles, what about this nanotech? I mean, don't you think that that could have a potentially huge role in this? We've seen doctors confused by the symptoms they've been seeing. Perhaps nanotechnology could be used to simulate the function of a particular disease.
Well, I think we've moved from woe is me, we don't have enough hospital capacity in New York City and other places. Let's build the capacity so the hospitals won't be overwhelmed. Get through the flattening the curve and get back to work. And now everyone has embraced this idea that there's a cure-all, there's a vaccine,
Right.
and that vaccines are painless. Vaccines are not painless. People who take the vaccine, a percentage of them will die.
Right.
And that just happens.
And get the sickness.
Right. Or get some other debilitating disease.
Right.
So there's no risk-free approach here, and certainly you wouldn't want to rush into a vaccine program championed by the people who are going to make the vaccines, which is, I think, what we have here.
Well, you raise an excellent point, because when doctors like that Dr. Daniel Erickson came out and said there's a lot of evidence and scientific research to indicate that we should open the country back up and let people out into public so that their immune systems can get back to normal, he's immediately slammed as doing that for some sort of financially motivated reason. But yet those same journalists who come out against Dr. Daniel Erickson, nobody is questioning Fauci for his financial motivation for the recommendations that he's making.
Well, exactly, and nor is anybody saying, all right, in Congress and in globalist media, who are the biggest contributors with respect to Congress and who are the biggest advertisers with respect to globalist media? Big Pharma.
Right.
So, this has been a case, and we'll go back and talk about it, and actually this new press secretary, the latest press secretary, what's her name, McElhaney? She's a very impressive person who went to Harvard Law School and has a certificate from Oxford or whatever. They tried to, go back over. They got her in the first conference.
A lot of frustrations in doing these. Patience to stick with us through the sound is back.
Good.
We're back.
And if it could be that there's a special trigger. We're getting right next to the place where the pond is, and it could be that there's some.
It's more likely some sort of software error, but who knows?
Yeah.
Hard to determine what causes these things, Charles. I should mention to everyone that we recorded a little segment on the way up here on the subway that was just too complicated to put out live. I might release that later today as a special segment for sponsors on subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. I really appreciate the people who are sponsoring the show and making this possible. And Charles, all these social engineering attacks are intended to deplatform and demonetize Crowdsource the Truth. So even if people just want to help counteract the social engineering, it's a good way to do that.
And I'm sure greatly appreciate it.
A lot of ice cream for sale now, Charles.
Yeah. Not
So
a fan.
it's a good sign, at least. Well, but it's a sign that commerce is coming back to some extent.
Yeah. How do you eat an ice cream with a mask on?
With a mask on? Well, it just speaks to the absurdity of the mask because,
Actually, have we done that movie? The Mask?
That's a good idea. We could use that. But, how do we know that guy's ice cream has been handled in a safe kind of way? And, people are holding their dogs who are walking around on the ground. It's just crazy.
This is a lot more busy.
Yeah.
Of course, it's now a lot warmer. In case folks are wondering why I have my overcoat on, it's because I fully expect it to wind to pick up and the temperature to drop on the end of my walk home.
Well, it's been confusing with the weather because, the phone will say 50 and then you come outside and it feels like it's 70, or it'll say 61 and you come outside and it feels like it's 30.
Depends on the wind and the shade.
Yeah.
So here we have exhibitionists.
Do we?
Well, the guy over there, far distance.
Didn't notice him. But this is a lot more people who are out. There are some good points being raised by people about getting vitamin D from the sun. You can't sit in your house for 2 months. And in New York City, if you have an apartment, it's very difficult to have access to sunlight, fresh air, without coming to parks. Now, why are they allowing this, but they wouldn't allow people in the park to protest the draconian edicts of the mayor and the governor?
Because this is the Upper East Side, expensive real estate, and there's one system of justice, and then there's a system of injustice. Majority of Americans live under a system of injustice.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what do you expect to see next with regard to General Flynn, Charles? Will he get a job in the Trump administration? Will he seek financial remuneration from Covington and Burling?
I hope he sues everyone, and I hope he gets, you know, he's had, at the peak of his career, he's had some of the best years of his life stolen from him. His family and he have been under amazing strains. I don't know, which way do we go? This way?
Charles, a social engineer is trying to disrupt our broadcast right now. He's
Really?
a liar, and I know he's a liar, and he's going to be exposed. He's texting me undoubtedly because he hopes it will disrupt the broadcast. Do it again. Do it again, John.
Yeah, so this is really expensive real estate in here, and people who frequent this part of the park are protected. And
This is kind of nice.
is that Bill Clinton on the saxophone? No, I don't think it is.
These are the tunnels that I'm aware of in Central Park.
I think there are also tunnels underneath the park in places.
Well, I've heard of that as well. And there are a lot of people who have said that the hospital, tent hospital, was all about rescuing children from those tunnels, but that appears to be a made-up story in
Here's
the
our
same
statue.
way. Ah, good, we can check it out. In the same way that the Russian dossier was made up. I mean, the reason I'm so persistently talking about social engineering is because all the people that are trying to shut down, crowdsource the truth, do appear to be linked to the people that are trying to shut down the Trump presidency.
Yeah.
In purpose, I mean, you know, we've heard George Webb say that he's always going to, be careful, Charles. He's always going to protect Barack
good
Obama.
Save, huh?
Very good save. We don't want Charles to stack.
Crack his ankle.
Charles, I mean, isn't that a little bit strange to say you're always going to protect someone? What if it's revealed that Barack Obama violated the Constitution?
I think we know that already.
We're right.
I mean,
so why protect that person unless you're...
Well, because you're on the wrong side of history.
Right.
I mean, I think, and the wrong side of life. I mean, I think for the president, I don't know if you saw the Oval Office statements he made about the Obama administration.
Look at that dog,
Nice
Charles.
dog, yeah. Look at those kids as well. They, for the president to say in the Oval Office what he said, that this was, you know, a disgrace, and it went right up to the top of the Obama administration. You don't say something like that,
Unless you know.
even if you're Donald Trump, who speaks impulsively, unless you're pretty sure of your ground. And then you don't let Michael Flynn's top lawyer, the great Sidney Powell, go on all these shows and say Barack Obama orchestrated this.
Well, she wouldn't say that either unless she was very confident.
Oh, she's
because
confident.
As a lawyer, I know she would be very careful about saying anything like that. Another thing that people aren't quite clear on, you know, they were hearing stuff about what Adam Schiff had said and whatever. Sometimes Adam Schiff is making allegations and saying things in Congress, or when people say certain things in lawsuits, they have immunity from prosecution. So if you accuse Donald Trump in a lawsuit of some kind, or say something on the floor of Congress, it's not the same as going on the news and accusing somebody of something. That
Or
opens you up.
testifying under oath.
Or testifying under oath, exactly. So it's interesting how these lawyers are aware of how they can manipulate.
What are these scarves doing on
Oh, look, they're wearing masks.
Oh, that's
Somebody
funny.
has put masks on the statue here.
that? That's funny. But not on all of them.
Right.
What's the one with the hat? The Mad Hatter?
Mad Hatter doesn't have it.
That's the Mad Scarfer. That's Deborah Birx. And,
Well, the Mad Hatter was Bill Clinton in our version of it, and the rabbit was Fauci. That's interesting. So that's cool. Good thing that we came to see that and see how that's changed. But normally, around this time of year, there'd be kids all over this thing.
well, and there'd be boats. Oh, here we get
Right,
a lot of
remote
wind.
control sailboats.
Yeah. Do you want to go?
Yeah, sure, wherever you want to go.
Maybe if we go to the side, there'll be slightly less wind.
I mean, it would absolutely be bigger than Watergate if there was a trial
it's
against
way
Barack
bigger.
Obama.
You know, and I've been, as you know, I've been doing print interviews with the great Katya Blanova, Sputnik, and I think we've done well over 100. And I also do a lot of interviewing on RT, and they had me do a hit, I think it was Friday morning, talking about Flynn, and that has been getting a fair amount of prominence. I mean, the big issue with Flynn is, to me, I'm really dumbfounded that somebody who's, you know, people on the left will say Barack Obama is scandal-free and a genius and all this stuff, that he would go to an incoming president-elect knowing full well that Donald Trump would soon have the ability to direct the spy agencies to get anything he wanted, that he would say to Donald Trump that the two biggest threats to America are North Korea and Michael Flynn. I mean, what about ISIS?
What about Barack Obama and his friends? They seem a bigger threat.
But certainly ISIS, right? I mean, you got to be a nincompoop to say.
You know, it's also the thing that's going around all these, you know, Saturday and Sunday news.
This one?
Who is this right here? Is that Lewis Carroll?
It's either Lewis Carroll, I think it is, it'll say. No, it's Hans Christian Andersen.
Some interesting statues around. Dog is posing for a picture.
There's a picnic over there. Not the smartest thing to do.
That's nice.
It's nice, but they're not social distancing.
I mean,
this is beautiful
I
flowers.
encourage people to not social distance. I think that's good that they defy it, but it does give us this stark contrast of some people are being allowed to do it and some people are being brutally beaten. We still don't know what the outcome was. I mean, somebody rests their knee on the back of your neck, that could give you injuries that you'll deal with for the rest of your life.
Yeah, well, I think this whole, well, just if I could go back to Michael Flynn in North Korea. Michael Flynn was appointed head of the Defense Intelligence Agency under the Barack Obama administration. So clearly somebody did some vetting and thought he was good enough for that post, and he served in that post with distinction. Why did he have a falling out with Barack Obama?
Because he said that he felt that ISIS was deliberately created.
Well, I understand. I know the answer to the question, but I'm just saying, before we say, yeah, it's okay to persecute
Which seems
Michael
correct,
Flynn.
by the way.
What? Yeah, I know. Even in the WikiLeaks Podesta emails, there are emails where Hillary Clinton admits it.
Right.
You know, that's, remember, Barack referred to them as the JV. They're just the JV.
Right. Junior varsity team.
Wrong on that. You know,
so he fell out of favor when he revealed what they were actually doing.
Well, exactly. And then he gets persecuted. And his life taken away from him, whereas meanwhile Barack Obama was so concerned about climate change, gets to buy a gigantic estate on the beach on Martha's Vineyard.
Right.
He's not concerned about his climate change, he's just burning his money. Or both.
It's so obvious at this point, Charles. It's frustrating that it's taken this long for anything to happen. So do we have a picture of what William Barr's next steps will be and what's going to happen as a result of this information that Sidney Powell has brought forward? And I mean, you know, how could Barack Obama ignore that the FBI's own notes, their own information reveals that this is what they plan to do, to frame Flynn?
I think we have to go back to the very beginning. We have to ask ourselves, you know, why did Barack Obama accept a memorandum of understanding with the Clinton Foundation that was so obviously wrong? Why did he allow the Clintons and their Clinton supporters to have so many major posts, significant posts? Why did he do no policing of the Clinton Foundation? You know, what was really going on at Benghazi?
Right.
Now, there's so many questions. Real journalists are going to answer those questions, but the lamestreamers that had the chance to do work were jobbed by Ben Rhodes and his brother and others.
You know, Charles, when you think about it, so many of the topics that you're talking about are, there's people who are directly connected to Crowdsource the Truth who are at the forefront of those matters. your research into the Clinton Foundation, the Moriarty's firsthand witness testimony and evidence that they've provided about things that went on in Libya, communications with the tribes about things that happened at Benghazi, etc. You know, it stands to reason that whoever doesn't want that information coming out would be, you know, trying to stop whatever it is that I'm doing here.
Exactly. And, you know, it's one thing to do that with your own personal resources, but it's yet another thing to train U.S. government taxpayer-funded resources on your political enemies, particularly in an era where the pipes move a lot of information quickly, but the pipes are easily constricted by the editorial decisions in the mainstream and by the socialist crazies who operate the modern platforms, the Twitters, the Googles, and others.
Right.
So, you know, you talk about social engineering, and I think it's a good topic to focus upon. There's also just influence bending. I mean, remember what is Dr. Epstein, who, not the bad Epstein.
Oh yeah, whose wife got into a car accident?
Right, who was going around saying that Google shifted a lot of votes in the 2016 election to Hillary. And I see that in my use of Google. You know, when I look for certain stuff, and, you know, I know there are stories out there, but I forgot the title.
Right.
They don't come up in the immediate search results. They're battened down.
Yep.
And then if you adjust the algorithms to, you Google Donald J. Trump and you get 15 stories about he's a jerk, he's a this, he's a that.
Yeah.
And you Google Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden, and you get a whole, let's slow down a little bit so we don't have to endure that.
Well, that's absolutely true, Charles. And I mean, there's other things that they're doing that seem even worse. There was that research paper done by those Indian scientists that found uncanny similarities between the spike protein, the glycoprotein 120, and the HIV-1 glycoprotein. So I would search for that one week on Google and it would come right up, and then the following week it was very difficult to find, and then the new finding didn't have all the same things associated with it.
Right.
Maybe that's the normal progression of how Google works, but it does seem like there is some manipulation. And of course, when we're talking about YouTube, they're just eliminating videos that they don't like. CEO of YouTube coming right out and saying, if you don't agree with the WHO, you're going to get eliminated.
Yeah, which is on its face stupid on many levels.
Maybe join the Navy, Charles.
Yeah, I just never gotten jazz. All that jazz, don't get it.
I like jazz.
I don't.
Well, there's more life returning to Central Park, and that's a good sign. It's actually a sign that, you know, you just can't suppress the human spirit, and the harder they try, the more tension that's going to create, and tension builds until something breaks.
Exactly.
So we would want to avoid the breaking. And you know, the thing to keep in mind, Charles, it's spring, and just as these trees are blooming and flowers are growing, people are social animals. We want to interact. People who aren't married and are of dating age want to be out, meeting people, doing things. I mean, you suppress that, you can't, you know, what is it? The equal and opposite reaction. There's not going to be no outcome from all this.
Right. Right, there's a lot of pent-up friction. I think one story we should touch on perhaps briefly is the Tara Reid accusation story. Interesting how initially nobody would touch that story in the mainstream media. Now they are reporting on it. And on my Twitter feed, Michael Tracy, who I forget what his position is, he's an investigative journalist in the, you know, the left-leaning guy. Right. I think he's either with Vice or something, was with Vice. He is cautioning on Twitter his colleagues from running with the Tara Reid story. He's trying to suggest that there are problems with it. I have to say, what I've seen so far, I find incredibly convincing, and it's really, unless she invented everything, which there's a possibility, but and I think it's remote. But if this story continues to stand, then it's like, sure. Well, that's going to take us west if you want to.
But it's a different part of the park we haven't been to.
Okay.
Right?
So that's a story that it's not going to go away by the time of the Democrat nomination convention in mid-August. And, again, unless it's a complete invention and there's no evidence to support her claims. So that's going to be out there through the general election. And if Biden's on the ticket, he's toast. He's absolutely toast. And I just can't, a lot of Democrats are very smart political operatives. I can't believe they're going to take this risk.
There's got to be something that they're cooking up. I mean, every time I see Joe Biden, he's looking less and less coherent. There's that ambulance driving around again.
It's following you.
I mean, it's just driving lazy circles doing nothing.
Yeah.
What's this dog statue all about?
No clue. We can find out, though. And I think then we go that way and we head west.
Is this dog canine idolatry, Charles? Is this Call of the Wild? Sled dog. Dedicated to the indomitable spirit of the sled dog. I told you I had a fight with a sled dog one time, right? They relayed, what does it say?
Where is this?
600 miles above rough ice across.
Oh, Nome, Alaska.
Maybe
1925.
they should have a gnome statue.
Should
Anyway.
we go up those
Sure.
steps? Careful. Balto. Jeez.
Yeah, we did the movie Call of the Wild, and the sled dogs are very, the leader of the pack was very into demonstrating that he was the leader, and he wanted to urinate on the 3D camera to prove that he was in charge. And the
You
AC,
weren't into that.
We weren't into that. The ACs got to tackling the dog when he would try to do it.
The Call of the Wild, is that, who was the author of that? Or the?
Jack London was the
Right.
author of the original, but this movie that we did was kind of like a remake. That was a modernization of it, where this little girl went to visit her grandfather, and he was reading her from Call of the Wild, and things in the movie sort of
Did you do it in
mirrored things
Alaska
in the
or where?
book. Montana.
Oh, that's in Montana. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I was doing in Montana. Oh, my throat is getting real dry all of a sudden.
Uh-oh.
Perhaps we're being sprayed with nanotechnology.
Let's hope not.
I hope not, too. I think that's happened.
So do we want to, we face a decision. If we go that way, we end up at Columbus Circle.
Well, let's keep heading down in the park if we can.
Okay.
So, Joe Biden, Tara Reid, big problems. Now we've got Barack Obama probably facing what he's been needing to face for the whole time he's been president. We're going to find out exactly how scandal-free his presidency was, or wasn't, as the case may be. Coronavirus aside, we're heading into uncharted waters, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, well, I think, we talked briefly about the Shannon Bream tease. Shannon Bream of Fox, the legal analyst, covers the Supreme Court. She teased out, I think it was Thursday night, that she's hearing there's going to be a big bombshell, massive bombshell involving the intelligence aspects. I think what that's going to be is we're going to find out more of what got Andrew Napolitano briefly kicked off air when he talked about the protocols that have been in place to allow Britons to spy on Americans of interest to the American government, while Americans spy on Britons of interest to the British government, and then swapping the fruit of the spying. I think we're going to find out that that was very common.
Yeah.
And it went back prior to 2016.
Yeah.
Probably prior to 2012. I actually have been going in this quiet period through all of my books that are of relevance to understanding the evolution of the Clinton Foundation. And I did find in Bill's book passages where he admitted that between December 68 or 9, I forget which, and the following year, he went on, while on a Rhodes Scholarship, he went on a 40-day tour through Northern Europe and the Soviet Union.
Which was unheard of at that time for
Yeah.
an American to travel to the Soviet Union, right? Maybe he was visiting,
Especially
Oswald was dead, but...
This is very beautiful in here, by the way, for people who haven't seen it before. But he admits that. And how he arranged it, how he financed it, are mysteries. He had no money at that moment in time.
Right.
He said he went to Northern Europe, and then later on in that same passage, he says he went to Norway. I think it was 69.
Did he hang out with Gro Harlan?
He might have. We're going to go that way or this way?
Whichever way you want to go.
No, you tell me.
Let's go a way we haven't been before, which I think is this way.
All right. So, and he also admits or states that George H.W. Bush had arranged to spy, or at least to contact, I think it was John Major's government, and get the British to go through their records concerning Bill Clinton while he was at Oxford in that 2-year period. So here he admits he did that. Another curiosity, we talked about it from his book, which is, I think, interesting. Do you want to walk up there and see the view and then walk back?
Sure, yeah.
Another thing that he admitted.
What's your favorite song, Charles?
It was interesting. Remember I talked to you about how this strange guy, David Edwards, was the person who entertained Clinton in his apartment in London. And then I said that David Edwards arranged for the Clintons to go to Haiti on a second honeymoon. Mm-hmm. Well, the truth is, that's the Wallman Rink. What's left of it. The real truth here turns out that in Bill's book, so it's not Edwards lying, it's Bill lying, he says that Edwards contacted him in, I want to say October or November 75, and stated that he wanted to gift the Clintons with frequent flyer miles, a frequent flyer award, to go to Haiti on a second honeymoon. What I forgot is that when I reread the passage, Edwards went along in that.
That's so weird.
That is extremely weird. So,
what kind of honeymoon is that?
To Haiti.
3-way honeymoon to Haiti?
Yeah,
it's pretty weird.
Yeah.
And also, frequent flyer miles, when did all that come about, Charles?
I looked into that.
Would airlines fly to Haiti?
There weren't any frequent flyer awards at that point. So the airline industry was deregulated in 1979, 78, 79 time frame. The frequent flyer programs, in effect, I think we want to go this way, Jason, here.
Sure.
Because you trip on a route or something. The frequent flyer programs that were available then didn't gift you with miles. So in 75, there's no way he got miles.
What was the frequent flyer program like then?
I must confess in that time frame I wasn't involved with it, but I think it was more like you got,
upgrades?
Not even that. You got, remember, it's regulated.
You get back then free airplane model.
You get you get a model, you get a hat.
I do remember the models of airplanes.
Right, but we're talking 1975.
Right, when I was a little kid, my uncle would give me these models of airplanes,
Sure.
which I guess were probably the free gift that he didn't want.
Right, so that story is a lie. That's why I call Bill Clinton's book My Lies, not My Life.
I saw a story about a guy, at one point, like American Airlines offered some unlimited program that this guy took advantage of, and then he was flying so much that they sued him and discontinued it and didn't do that anymore. So it's funny.
Flying's never going to be the same.
How do you envision it's going to change? They're going to make you prove you have the chip?
I don't know about that, because it's not just the one vaccine, right? You've got any infectious disease.
Right.
Maybe you're going to have to be tested for that, all of them.
I mean, that's...
But, and what, the airlines have been profitable.
Wait, look at this, Charles.
What?
Over here, across the street. That's a lot of Parks vehicles. Do we usually see that?
I think this is where they park, as it were, a lot of them.
Parking?
Park vehicle parking.
Sorry, so airline industry is going to change?
Well, I mean, it was profitable because they could slam so many people in and sell tickets at the last minute. If now you're going to make it more burdensome for people to board a plane, that means the lines are going to be longer if people bother to fly, and then you're going to have to reconfigure the interior of the planes. You can't have people 3 inches away from somebody. So, I mean...
What happens if somebody comes out and proves that Fauci was lying, none of this is based on scientific evidence, and it's all a sham? It's too late. All these mask-wearing people are never going to believe that.
Of course. Well, we see how, what Rush refers to them as the sheeple. We see how, somebody in a position of perceived authority and credibility says something, And then rather than think for yourself and use an inquiring mind, you say, well, Goodman said this is the case. Well, let's just do what he said. Goodman likes kombucha. Let's have kombucha. I mean, I'm not saying it's bad, but I'm not going to drink it.
Yeah. Well, I have to order it from the internet now. I can't even go into the supermarket.
Yeah.
Well, let's see if we have any comments, Charles. Perhaps we can communicate with some of our viewers here. Oops. I'm all wired up. I think I just accidentally unplugged this. See, when things don't go the way I plan, it becomes very difficult to manage. Ooh, we have 1,400 people watching us right now.
That's great. Thank you.
Unfortunately, this interface is too small for me to see the comments, so that's not going to work.
Well, let's not worry about anything. But truly, I always say that on a beautiful sunny day, low humidity, Detroit would look nice too. I mean, but New York, here we're in the heart of New York, getting close to some very fancy clubs and properties. You see that red brick building there? I forget if that's, that might be the Knickerbocker Club. I believe.
It's amazingly quiet, Charles. You don't usually, I mean, there are things to enjoy about this. If we can set aside, is this a corgi? It's a happy little dog. There are things to enjoy, you know, it's quiet little moments if you can get past the fact that every business is going under, you can't interact with another human.
And you've lost your constitutional rights.
Lost your constitutional rights.
Because some conflicted, arrogant governor, Cuomo the Shlomo, wakes up and decides, New York's not going to open until June 7th, because I say it's not going to open until June 7th.
What about Pamela Geller's lawsuit? I just found out about that this morning. Pamela Geller has brought a lawsuit against de Blasio. I don't know if it's a mandamus suit, but it definitely was First Amendment and 14th Amendment. What do you think about that? Have you had a chance to look at that?
I regard Pamela Geller in the highest esteem. She's a very smart and courageous.
Should we go over here and just check this area?
Sure. Fierce lady who has been, I think, unfairly criticized. This is really beautiful. The thing I like about this, you usually have your paddle boats on here. Yeah. This area was re-landscaped, I want to say in the 80s, maybe the 90s. But it's just stunning.
Now, on a day like today, normally this little lake or pond or whatever it is would be filled with people having romantic boat rides, falling in love. None of that is happening.
Well, you don't know. There could be scuba divers under there.
Scuba diving, yes. That's possible.
But
this is sad, Charles.
Yeah.
Central Park pond empty.
Beautiful, though.
I saw some statistic about, I don't remember if it was London, I think it was London, the number of days that they haven't burned coal for. And I think it was 28, it was a record.
Well, the air is definitely clearer, it seems. Is that a crocodile? Right?
No, that's a
Just
log.
kidding.
That would be funny if there was a crocodile in Central Park.
Do we talk about the president of Tanzania and what he did?
No, let's talk about it.
So, we have been skeptical of the World Health Organization for some time for, I think, excellent reasons. In part because no global system of health is going to be stronger than its weakest link. And so much of the population globally, maybe that way, or?
This is more the direction we want to go, right?
No system where people travel freely around the planet is going to be any stronger than the weakest health system. And system in Ethiopia, where Dr. Tedros, who's not a medical doctor, hails from, is a joke. Even after the Clinton Foundation and Yale University worked there for decades, or decade and a half, much of it during the time that Tedros was either health minister on the chair of the Global Fund in Geneva or foreign minister of Ethiopia. So there's a Tanzanian maverick leader, president, I guess, who has got some very controversial opinions on everything, but he does not like Tedros. Clearly it is not a racial thing.
Right.
He thinks Tedros is a jerk and a crook.
Yeah,
and so
right.
to test this testing system, he decided that he would send 3 samples in to Geneva, and they all came back positive when they went through the rigorous COVID-19 testing system in Geneva. And then Prime Minister or President just gave a press conference where he announced that the samples that he had sent were a goat, a pheasant, and a papaya.
He's the papaya king.
But seriously, I think, you know, when we talk about inequality, we talk about the inequality of health delivery systems inside the richest country on earth. You know, that's true. There are unequal distributions of doctors and hospital beds and talent serving the richest and the poorest in this rich country in the world. But when you look at it on a global basis, the disparities are even larger. In fact, I was told, or I think I read somewhere, that there are more Ethiopian doctors in Chicago than there are in Ethiopia. And I don't fault the people, the Ethiopian doctors who left Ethiopia. I mean, you're going to study as hard as you need to study to get the qualifications. If you can move to this country and make a much higher standard of living, you should do that, if you can do it. But the notion that some corrupt person with a horrible track record is going to be now dictating. Which way do you want to go, Jason?
Well, I just want to ask you a quick question, Charles, because I'm noticing something strange. I mean, there's almost nobody out, but here we have, is that a Rolls or a Bentley? I think it's a Rolls right there. Mercedes.
These are condos, or they were condos.
Bentley's down there. The Plaza's condos?
Yeah.
Well, the Bentleys and the Rolls Royces are out, so that's interesting. Now, sorry, just to go back real quickly, the guy's point in sending non-human samples were that they can't even tell that they're not human.
Right.
And so how accurate is the testing?
Exactly, and I think this is the bias of some of these global aid and health projects. I think we saw it very clearly in the granular work that I've been doing, that Larry Doyle and John Moynihan have been doing on the Global Fund and the Clinton Foundation. If you go and you take George W., low IQ, Bush, and he wants to score points and says, all right, Clinton only gave $500 million for HIV and AIDS, I'm going to give $15 billion. I'll be an instant hit. You know, and on the surface level, people were blown away and said, wow, that's pretty generous. But the problem with that is the medicines and the aid were destined to go to countries that didn't have the infrastructure to take the aid. And so the crooks in the recipient countries and in the donor countries said, this is fantastic. You know, we'll get a whole bunch of airheads who are happy to write brochures and studies saying that, you know, the efficacy of this program and the efficacy of that program. And we'll just send the money to Switzerland, where there are no Swiss bank accounts where you can hive off a whole bunch of money.
I thought they eliminated that.
Not in 2002, they didn't. And they have now, more or less. And maybe we should go this way so it doesn't get the scaffolding.
Wow, what is that? Rolls-Royce SUV. Never seen that before.
You don't have one of those? I got 3.
I don't have one of those. I didn't even know that they made that.
So you have the fact that conditions on the ground, I would say across sub-Saharan Africa in the health field, are probably not much better than they were in 2002, even though billions of dollars have been spent by many people on projects. And then you say, all right, the way you're going to get this money is if you stand up and say you have an HIV and AIDS problem. And the leader says, well, how do I do that? I don't have any doctors, I can't test anything. Don't worry, we'll send you some tests that are going to most likely give you false positives.
Wow.
Which is what happened.
Did that happen?
Yes,
wow.
Absolutely that happened. There's extensive writing about this, that the tests, when you go in to take an HIV/AIDS test in America, first of all, you can count on the fact that the patient likely has clean water, clean sanitation, a better diet than you're going to see in almost any African country. So,
well, unless they're eating McDonald's all the time.
Right. I said almost. And easy on the McDonald's. But anyway. So yeah, there are different categories of tests, and people write about this, that the test that is given in Africa is not as precise, and it will give false positives, particularly to pregnant women.
Wow.
And so you go through a system, you say, do you have an HIV/AIDS problem? Yes, I do. Well, that means you're going to get a lot more money. Great. You know,
Well, this is a mirror image of what's happening here right now with
Right.
COVID-19.
it's the same, I think, with global warming. You allow somebody to go and stand up and say, I assert that there's a global problem. I assert that only I can solve it. I assert that I need a lot of money. And I assert that if you challenge me, you're a homophobe, or you're a whatever, you're a racist.
Right.
You're an idiot, elitist. And that way of thinking is, you know, is mentally deficient. Now look here, this is one of the prime shopping corners in New York City. And it's either under construction or closed, and there are no tourists to speak of.
And we're on month 3 of this. We're starting the 3rd month of this.
And there's no way to bring the lost revenue back. There's absolutely no way to do it. There's no way, you know, you can't go and with a magic wand say, all right, the federal government's going to pay for everything. Because we don't have the money to do that, nor should we do that. And you can't say the rich are going to pay for everything, because the rich don't have that much money and they're not going to pay for everything.
It's all tied up in Rolls-Royce SUVs.
But
they're not exactly liquid, Charles.
yeah.
Well, this will be...
This is a bit noisy. Should we... You think we should go down 6th?
Sorry?
Think that'd be...
Well, let's walk past
Trump Tower? Okay.
just to see if anything has changed from a security
They're outside
standpoint.
there.
Yeah. I mean, there's nobody checking it out. Normally there's lots of people taking pictures, hanging out, and obviously tons of people live there. The police outside, that's been happening since Donald Trump became president. And the barricade looks actually pretty standard. It doesn't seem to have changed very much as
I don't
compared
think
to
this
last
will ever
week.
change, right?
Well,
I mean,
I
so
don't
long
know.
as he's alive.
I would think not. I am sort of all right with that. I like it that we have a president who's somewhat Batman-like, having his own building.
Yeah. Somebody who actually made money in the private sector, like Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
Boy, on that subject, I've been doing a lot of work on the early period of Bill and Hillary's life in Arkansas. And if these people are among the smartest people in the world when it comes to law and the finance, Lord help us.
Yeah.
The stuff that's in the public domain about their early Whitewater investment, and it's not really just Whitewater, their land development projects and their banking projects, the stuff that is in the public domain alone, if there were no statute of limitations, and maybe there is no statute of limitations because perhaps there's been a conspiracy to cover this up, and an ongoing conspiracy, and they certainly did not file their taxes properly from what you can see in the public domain. An example,
Wait a minute, look at this. It's God's house, all are welcome, but it's closed.
yeah,
Not their fault, but an interesting...
yeah. So I just remember these dates because they're fresh in my mind. On October 2nd, 1978, supposedly, Bill and Hillary Clinton and Jim and Susan McDougal entered into a contract to purchase 230.24 acres of completely undeveloped land in a remote portion of Arkansas that
Difficult
had
to
no
access.
electricity, no roads, no nothing.
Right.
And I don't think it had been subdivided. Now, I have done several land development projects with my own money. And, Jesus,
That was weird, right?
very weird. And the difference, what you go online now in 2020, as I did this morning, and you'll find out that you can get a land loan, but typically it would be a loan against an improved lot. You know, a lot that has electricity, that has a driveway, that fits the zoning, on which you could build a house that has
wait.
improved.
They've got a thing that says coronavirus testing now. Yeah, it went away. It said coronavirus testing now available across 5 boroughs. So sorry, you're saying it's too risky for people to give you money to develop stuff
Today,
that's
in 2020, it's way too risky to try to get, you won't get a loan, even if you have excellent credit.
And you're a developer?
Even then, you're not going to get a loan for more than maybe 50%, maybe.
Just too much stuff that can go wrong with that kind of development?
Well, you have no collateral, right? I mean, unimproved land, there's no guarantee that you're going to get the local approvals.
Because they know you could get there, get the loan, get there, buy the land, and they say, oh, there's some contaminant here that's going to cost $50 billion to clean up.
So this is now when capital markets are much more developed and interest rates are really low. Back in 1978, when they first purchased the property, they purchased it as individuals. And they then, and interest rates, mortgage rates for a house where you had collateral were 10%. And you typically had to put up 20% minimum down payment on a house. Back then, I don't think you could get a legitimate land loan from a real bank.
Who gave them the loan? The Stevens?
It was a tiny bank that was incredibly conflicted, called Citizens Bank and Trust of Flippin, F-L-I-P-P-I-N, Arkansas.
Now wait a minute, haven't I heard of that because it was part of the SNL skin?
Well, so the reason that's significant is the president of that Flippin Citizens Bank was part of the consortium of people who bought the 3,200 acres in which Whitewater was a small piece, 230 or 7%. The CEO of the Citizens Bank, and let's get away from this guy in the corner. He had an interest in finding some schmuck to say that he was going to overpay for the land. The group that bought the 3,200 undeveloped, we don't have the land. Now we do. They bought the land for $440 per acre. And 19 days later, the Clintons, in theory, with the McDougalls, bought 230 or 7% of the land for $880 a square foot. Now, one of the reasons they likely did that is the president of Citizens Bank wanted to be able to say to his consortium, I have a comparable here. The land at the 3,200 acres that I just bought, we all bought for $440. I just unloaded 230 acres at $880. That means the value of the residual is higher.
Right.
And that is rigged stuff. And you're not supposed to do those type of transactions. And but even back then, there's no way the Clintons should and the McDougalls should have been able to buy the land putting no cash down. 100% debt financed. So I think to date, the work that has been done looking at Whitewater and Madison have missed the much larger scandal than just the individual Whitewater transaction or the looting of the Madison Bank. This is about banking practices that are unlawful today, that are risk-prone, creating fortunes for the insiders, and then abusing the unsophisticated lot purchasers who were not buying the land on the same basis. And it's also probably about using these land transactions to arrange loan proceeds and profits for the sellers that then could be used to finance these political campaigns.
Well, that's interesting, Charles. Has that come out before with regard to Whitewater, or is that particular detail something you've just found?
Well, it's new, I think. And a further thing. So, when the Clintons bought the land, they bought it personally. Then, with the McDougalls, they flipped it into a corporation. And I found evidence that the corporation is what's called a C corporation.
Right.
Now, a C corporation is a traditional corporation. So, when you put something into a C corporation, you do it in exchange for getting something back, either a note or shares. And there was a loan against this property. The value of the property had plummeted because between 78 and 79, interest rates had soared, asset values had gone down, and we don't have any evidence yet that the evaluation was done on the date it was flipped in, I think in September 1979, of the changes in values of the assets and the liabilities. But what the Clintons alleged, the McDougalls, is that the value of the property went up, which it didn't. So then what they did with regard to their 1979 and subsequent taxes, they claimed that monies paid personally on mortgages, on the mortgage, were deductible on their personal tax returns, which they wouldn't be, because they created a C corporation. You could deduct it against the interest payments against the income of the C corporation, but you certainly can't deduct it against your personal income taxes. You can't do that, but they did it.
This is just totally,
and so,
and no aspect of it isn't fraud.
Yeah, and so I got into this saying, you know, they've so mishandled the accounting and reporting of the William J. Clinton Presidential Foundation from October 23, 1997 to the present. Maybe this is not a mistake, you know, maybe, but when you see this is just how they roll.
Yeah. That's unbelievable, Charles. Did you notice? Sorry?
You could do, sorry to interrupt you, you could do a book just on this set of transactions.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And they always just say, oh, Whitewater, it was just a bad land deal. So that's, again, a situation where they want to direct you to whatever sort of crooked litigation they've been able to manipulate, and they've achieved an outcome that they like, much like they have with Michael Flynn. And they say, no, don't go back and look at the original evidence or the original fraudulent process that was used to get here. Let's just look at the end.
Right.
And we have to stick to the end. We're saying, no, we got to go back to the beginning and look at how this was all set up. And that's what they want to steer you away from. Did you notice those police officers back there, Charles? They were not wearing masks and they were not socially distancing. So yet another example. Well, no, the counterterrorism guys were wearing masks.
Oh, were they?
The regular NYPD guys were not. So it's yet another example of NYPD failing to enforce the law by example, which of course is the best and first way to do it. There's another ambulance over there doing nothing, if people can see that.
Another what, ambulance?
What is it?
You said it's another ambulance?
Yeah, just hanging out doing nothing.
You know, they have the light, he has the light.
Well, we're all right though, no cars coming. Charles, I tell you, it's a difficult time for people. Oh, and WeWork. I thought I turned that off. WeWork is trying to screw with our Wi-Fi here. So many different things that can go wrong.
So yeah, now we're close to Grand Central Station.
Would you like to go visit again to see how it's
up to you.
Developed over the past week? We could.
Wasn't it 2 weeks ago that we went there, or was it last week we went there?
I feel like it was last week we were in there. It was
you
totally
want to go?
empty.
We could go down the escalator that way.
Sure.
Go this way and
whatever you want to do. This is the Barnes & Noble where Laura Loomer informed James Comey that he was going to get locked up. That prophetic warning seems more true than ever right now.
How is Laura doing on her campaign?
She's doing very well. I spoke to her not that long ago. She's raising more money than any of her competitors. And the big thing I was talking to her about was that there was a concern that her lawsuit against Facebook might be dismissed. But the judge said, no, it can go forward.
Really?
Yes, so Laura might become a billionaire with a portion of Mark Zuckerberg's money. I would caution people not to get too excited about it yet, because this is a lawsuit that's likely to go on for many, many years. Laura's advantage, of course, being that she's very young, so she could outlive the lawyers who are trying to stop it, but we'll see how that goes. A lot of lawsuits, Charles, and it's interesting to see how these lawsuits are positioned. I believe Laura's lawsuit is a legitimate one and an important one. I think I'm interested in learning more about Pamela Geller's lawsuit against the mayor and these draconian unconstitutional orders. Hopefully it will at least put some national attention on it, get some judges talking about it. Obviously, if a federal judge
excuse me,
tells the mayor or the governor that they can't do something, that holds a lot more weight than if I do it.
So this is the old prime retailing district in New York City. Oh.
I didn't know there was a Roosevelt Hotel here. I know the Roosevelt Hotel in Hollywood.
Should we cross?
Sure.
What lunatic feeds pigeons?
Yeah, people like to do that. Wow, Charles, look at that. No traffic all the way downtown still after weeks. I
Again,
think
this is, you know, it's now run down. It'll all be torn down, I suspect, a lot of these buildings.
Why?
But when I was a kid, this was the vibrant heart of the shopping district, upscale shopping district.
Ah.
Now it's almost derelict.
Well, it's hard to tell what is just sort of like protecting itself by, it seems that, you know, covering the windows seems to be something a lot of these places are doing.
Yeah.
I don't really understand what benefit that provides.
This was the old Bear Stearns building. Of course, J.P. Morgan got it. That way, that way.
Pretty dead around here.
Diagonal. Wow. Now, to be fair, on a Sunday,
It's always dead around here.
it's pretty dead around here.
Yeah, this is definitely like work week kind of area where people are out, you know, having lunch and stuff. But I mean, even at night, this area is pretty quiet. I guess some people are going about regular travel. I don't know.
Excuse me.
You feeling all right, Charles?
Yeah, I've just got something stuck in the back.
Maybe we need to stick a Q-tip down your throat, through the nose.
No, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, you know, when we hear these stories about the faulty tests and everything, I'm not interested in a test. I'm not interested in a vaccine. I'm not interested in a mask. I mean, it seems like they're resigned to having everybody remain locked in their homes ordering food from the internet.
Oh, wow. We can get in this way.
Sure. Well, if we cut out again, that'll just be the end.
All right.
But definitely want to thank the viewer sponsors who make the show possible each week. And if people are watching us for the first time, I hope they'll become sponsors on subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. Charles, I almost forgot to announce a new feature.
What's that?
Well, people have been asking for this for almost 2 years, and I've been asking Patreon to do it for almost 2 years, but they haven't responded. Subscribestar has stepped up to the plate. Now people can purchase gift subscriptions for family members and friends, and also people who don't want to use credit cards on the internet can purchase a subscription to the sponsor-exclusive shows with cash or a check. The address for Crowdsource the Truth is available on crowdsourcethetruth.org.
Wow.
And for as little as $2 a month, people can purchase a subscription and watch all the sponsor-exclusive shows. I've added the first, gift subscription yesterday. So thank you to Carol for that. And anyone who is interested and has questions can email me on truth@crowdsourcethetruth.org. And I suspect we might lose signal inside this building.
Why don't we stop it just because of my cough?
Well, if you want me to, I can, but
yeah.
You sure you don't want to go in there? Okay.
Yeah, I think.
All right, everybody. Thanks for watching.